I'm going to fix this agency's onboarding process in the next 15 minutes. Now, for context, this is an older onboarding process which one of my clients used to have before we started working together. My aim for this video is to talk over everything that was wrong about this process and, more importantly, show you exactly what we did to actually improve his onboarding process. This, along with a couple of different implementations for his fulfillment and sales process, actually allowed him to 4x his capacity. So you sitting right now in the comfort of your home, your office, wherever you are, you can copy the exact same thing into your agency's onboarding process to improve your client experience and decrease your churn rate. Now, if you're wondering who this random guy on YouTube actually is, my name's Leo, I love Orange, and I'm the CEO and founder of Fluxomate. We run an operation agency that helps leading seven-figure agencies doing all the way up to 300k a month take on more clients without ruining the client experience or stressing out their team. Before we talk about the actual constraints and the improvements that we made to the onboarding process, let's just talk through what they were actually currently doing for the onboarding. So for them, the onboarding process started when a client actually got signed, and this is quite interesting because what I've seen from a lot of different onboarding processes is that people have different triggers. Now in this example, the reason the initiation, I guess, for the onboarding process was a contract actually being signed is because during the sales process, they were basically creating contracts for everyone. So rather than creating a contract only people that are interested or only people that pay, depending on how other people do it, they were basically creating a contract for every single person after the sales call. And that was kind of sort of the initiation point to get people in. Super smart. It doesn't really matter what you're doing. But let's say in this example, the initiation point of the onboarding process was that contract actually being signed by the client. Next, once that actually contract was signed, they would manually check it, and then they would manually send an email over to the client with a link to the onboarding form where they'll collect different information. Then when that's happening at the same time, they would also create a Slack channel for the client and then set up different Google Drive folders with different things such as the contract, documents, so on and so forth. And then they basically wait along and wait for the form to be completed. Once that form was actually completed, they actually go ahead and schedule the onboarding call. And then after, let's say 2-3 days after, they would actually have the onboarding call. And then that's when the fulfillment process will basically start. Now, this is a very typical onboarding process, guys. I mean, we've done a lot of different agency audits for a lot of different agencies. And this is a very common and simple onboarding process that a lot of agency owners are actually running with. Obviously slightly different, but the main fundamentals are the same. And what's important about this is a lot of the constraints are actually the same. So pay attention, because this actually might apply to your onboarding process. There's a lot we can actually improve it. Now, the first thing we want to actually tackle is the individual constraints. And personally for me, when I was talking to this client, we're kind of breaking down his current process. One thing that really stood out for me is throughout the entire process, there was a general lack of communication. And there's two different types of communication that you can have. We have internal communication and then we have external communication. Now, internal communication is basic communication with your team. External communication, you probably guessed it, is communication with your client. And if we look at this onboarding process, we'll first focus on the external communication, so communication with clients. The only time we're actually talking to clients is when we're actually sending them an onboarding form, when we're scheduling the onboarding call, and when we're actually having an onboarding call. But one thing that we want to realize, guys, is this process from start to finish probably takes this guy about 4 to 5 days, if we're being generous, right? Depending obviously on the client's availability for the actual onboarding call. So you're telling me within 4 to 5 days of the client sending you money and you actually onboarding them, you're only talking to them on 3 occasions. That's not good enough, especially because most of these conversations are very simple. I mean, this is just an onboarding email. This is a quick back and forth on Slack or email. And this is obviously a bit longer call. But this is not good enough, guys. The way I need to think of onboarding process is as a first impression. And the first impressions you make really do matter. I mean, imagine if, I don't know, your daughter, your sister, whoever brought back home a boyfriend. And the first impression you got of them was they were drunk, right? They couldn't speak properly. They weren't well dressed. I don't know. They just gave you very, very bad vibes. You're going to kind of live with that impression, even if down the line they kind of improve their image. But on the other hand, if someone comes in, they're very well presented, they're very well mannered, they treat your sister, daughter, whoever it may be with respect, you're going to have a much better first impression of them. And this is the exact same thing that we actually want. Obviously, in this case, we're not talking about dating, we're talking about your agency. But at the same time, first impressions still matter. This is the first impression your client has of you. So we want to make sure to make it count. So the first kind of main kind of constraint, I guess, is the lack of internal and external communication. External communication throughout the whole onboarding process, there's just a general lack of it, right? There's only 3 different separate points that we're actually talking to the client, and most of these are through email. This is through Slack, and then this is the only time you actually get to speak to the client, right? So after 4 days, 5 days, however long this process takes, the first time they actually get to speak to someone is on the actual onboarding call, which is simply isn't good enough. And the second constraint we have is due to the internal communication. There's no sort of communication between the actual team itself to inform them. For example, different things such as the contract being signed, the team has to actually manually check that. Different things such as the form being completed, the team has to manually check that, right? And this leads to a lot of different problems, guys, believe it or not. Because, for example, if let's say Bob, he forgets to check that the form is actually complete, and then client completed the form on day 2, but then Bob only sees it on day 4, that's 2 whole days where the client has no clue what's going on just because Bob forgot to actually check the form, right? But if there was some sort of internal communication for Bob, then that would never happen. And Bob would be on top of his stuff and we wouldn't have any delays in the actual onboarding process, guys. And the same exact thing for contract signature. Let's say you send a contract to your client on Monday, but Charlie this time doesn't see the contract actually being signed until Friday. Now you've got 5 days wasted for no apparent reason. And let's say the onboarding process takes 4 days, you're now extending the onboarding process to an entire 9 days, completely unnecessarily, right? All you have to do was set up a simple notification to actually avoid this from happening. That's kind of one of the problems with the onboarding process. The second main constraint, I guess, there was no internal communication through different access points or different things that happen, right? Even for example, something as simple as send Google Drive folders, right? There was no sort of, like say, task creation in the project management system that let them know that they actually had to create those Google Drive folders. It was most based on okay, I'll do it when I do it kind of basis, which isn't exactly helpful, especially when you're bringing on more people. And this is important, guys, but let's say you're bringing on 2 people a month. It doesn't really matter, right? Don't get me wrong, it's still good to have it kind of streamlined, but it's not essential, right? But when you get to that point when you're onboarding 10, 20, 30 people a month, like some of our clients are doing, gets very, very hectic. And you don't want different things to be on a basis of I'll do it when I do it, because the likelihood that you forget something is, you imagine it, very, very high. So that was the second issue. The third issue was actually, interestingly enough, within the actual onboarding form itself. Now, I can't actually show you guys the form because I don't want to expose this guy whole backend system, but there was a couple of problems with the onboarding form, which I want to kind of clarify and initially point out. And this is actually going to be 4 individual subsections, right? So the first part of it is that they weren't collecting enough information. Now, the way I see onboarding form, and I've got a whole video going over onboarding forms and how you can actually create them on my channel, but the way I see onboarding forms is to collect 2 main types of information. You need information that you actually need to start the project, right? So this is essential information, which without this, you can't basically begin working on the actual client. And then you need extra information. Now, I forgot the actual name I gave to this, but this is more so additional information which you can use down the line as leverage. And this is very important to actually collect at this stage, because when you actually use it, in a couple of examples I'm going to give you in a second, it's going to really give you different opportunities to enhance your client experience. Now, the extra information can be different things such as the anniversary, right? It can be different things such as their birthdays. It can even be something as simple as their favorite sports team. The whole point of this is you collect information which you can use down the line, whether it's the anniversary, whether you mess up and you need to kind of make something up for them, but you basically want to buy yourself leverage. And in the current onboarding process, they had no sort of collection of this information, which is really, really important. And in the future will also allow you to kind of enhance that client experience. For example, I've got a client, which as you see that I forgot the actual sports team name of a hat in the background, but they love that particular team. And when they saw the hat, they were kind of geeking out about it, right? But if I would have collected that information on the onboarding form, I would have had an idea. And maybe, you know, this is very silly, but I could have worn the hat on a call or something like that, and it strengthened our client relationship. But it's those different things like that that really make a difference, right? I'm not going to draw the whole graph now, but if you watch any of my videos, you know about this kind of matrix right here. Here you have results, and here you have experience. Obviously, the lowest churn, is when you have high results and a high experience. But the second lowest churn is not when you give guys the best results and a poor experience. It's actually when you give people a great experience and poor results. And using different information like this is an easy way you can actually do it. The second point of the onboarding form that was really, really lacking, guys, was the lack of instructions. Now, just for context, within the onboarding form, he has quite a technical setup. So he was asking the clients to actually sign up to a bunch of different softwares and set up a couple of different things. However, for each of the different steps, he had no real clarity on how to actually do that. It was maybe that sentence just describing what they had to do. And this, unfortunately, is not the way to do things, guys, because you're much more likely to actually have delays with an onboarding process, which you actually don't want. So for example, let's say you ask the client to sign up to software A. If they have any actually issues signing up to this, what's this going to cause? Well, very simply, it's going to cause delays. And this is one of the most important factors, guys. But any delays caused within the actual onboarding process delay the whole fulfillment process, because everything's happening after the other. We can't actually move on to fulfillment until onboarding is actually complete, especially the onboarding form. So implementing a simple SOP in the actual onboarding process will be an easy way to avoid these delays from actually happening. And once again, we'll talk about implication in a second, but the second main constraint specifically for the onboarding form was that he wasn't given enough clarity on the different steps they actually had to create. The third thing, which is a very, very massive thing, was affiliates, right? I mentioned that in this particular onboarding form, he was asking the clients to sign up to different things. And this individual gentleman right here, he had different affiliates for each of the software he's asking people to sign up. However, he wasn't actually sharing those affiliate links with people. And guys, this is an easy way to actually increase your monthly recurring revenue, right? It's not gonna be crazy. I mean, depending on how many clients you have, this can be anywhere from, let's say, 500 to even 5k, but it's free money and there's no reason that you don't get your actual customers to actually use your affiliate link. So that was the fourth problem with it. And the last problem I had with the onboarding form, the main constraint, I guess, was that in the actual form itself, if you go all the way back over here, there was no sort of reminders for the form to be complete. And once again, guys, I want you to remember, guys, this form right here is a very important part of the onboarding process, because unless they actually complete this form, we actually can't move on. We can't schedule our onboarding call and we can't actually begin the actual fulfillment process. So not having some sort of reminder or some sort of check-in to actually ensure the clients actually complete the onboarding form is not good at all. Because if they don't complete the onboarding form, once again, you can't move on to fulfillment, which is going to cause delays. And this is the number one thing we want to avoid. We want people to come into your agency and get their specific outcome as soon as possible, and any sort of delay prevents this from happening, which you don't want. So basically, not having some sort of check-in system that allows you to ensure the onboarding form is being done in a timely manner is another constraint. Now, I've done enough talking about the form. Let's talk about another constraints that we had with the onboarding process. And this is kind of nitpicking, don't get me wrong, but if we're talking about kind of the deal onboarding process, it's something that we need to mention. At no point throughout this onboarding process are we kind of reassuring the client's decision. And you can all do this in a lot of different ways, but one way that I really love to do this, and for a lot of different people, especially in the high ticket space, is some form of gifting. Now, obviously, this looks a lot different for a lot of different industries, but this can be anything from a handwritten card, an Amazon gift card, wherever it is that your clients actually want. It's just something small to say thank you. It really, really goes a long way. Even for me, I'm in the United Kingdom. Most of my clients are in the States, so it is a bit harder, but we always pay that extra shipping fee to get our clients some sort of gift when they actually first sign on. Because all you're doing here is basically reassuring their decision and actually working with you, right? Because once again, as soon as that payment leaves their account and enter yours, they're going to regret it, guys. I'm telling you right now, they're going to regret it straight out of the bat. And your job is basically to decrease that buyer's remorse so they feel a lot more confident in what you're actually doing. So that's the third constraint. The fourth constraint in this actual whole process was very simply a lack of a welcome sequence. Now, a lot of people have welcome sequences when it comes to sales, when it comes to lead nurture, all that, those different things, but they never have any welcome sequences for their onboarding process, which, guys, at this point you're still selling the client, right? The client is not sold. And this is particularly relevant to this individual gentleman here, because when the contract actually being signed, he wasn't collecting the full payment, he was just collecting the deposit. So his job from now until day 30 of the fulfillment process is just making sure that he's selling the client on who his company actually is and the results they can actually generate for them. However, in the whole onboarding process, there was no onboarding welcome sequence. And I love to introduce this to a lot of different clients. And the reason why is because it works so well. A massive constraint here is that the client doesn't trust you yet. Just because they paid you doesn't mean they're on your side, right? And having a simple onboarding welcome flow where it kind of takes them through what to expect, different results from clients and how they've helped them in the past, or even different case studies and whatnot, is such a simple way to increase that trust your actually client has for you. So that's the fourth constraint. There was no onboarding welcome flow. The fifth constraint, and I can keep talking about this for ages, guys, but in general, everything that happened in the onboarding process was manual. Now, don't get me wrong, even though I love automation, I don't think a business should be automating every single aspect. There's some things that has to be done manually, but in this case, there were very simple things that there's no reason not to automate them, right? For example, the Slack channel creation is very, very easy thing to automate. Same exact thing with the Google Drive folders. It's very easy to actually automate, and there's no reason to actually not automate it, right? And the reason why I'm a big fan of this, specifically in the onboarding process, is once again, we do not want any delays, right? And kind of relying on Bob or Charlie or whoever else it may be to actually come in and have to check the form and then send up emails is just a lot more likely to actually cause delays, which you do not want. So having some sort of automated system, even the simplest automation that when a contract is signed, sends them an email, so on and so forth, is going to go a long way in actually ensuring there are no delays in the actual onboarding process. So guys, those were, I think, the top 5 constraints that we talked about in the kind of onboarding process. Now, let me talk through each individual constraint and tell you exactly how we fixed it. Now, for context, this is the optimized onboarding process. I don't want to specifically go through that because I don't think it'll be a lot of value to you. Your onboarding process will look different. What I'm going to do instead is kind of highlight each individual point one by one, and we'll talk through how we can actually improve it. So the first point that we actually talked about in this specific instance was the lack of internal communication. Now, this is actually quite a simple fix to actually implement, right? Because all we want to do here is basically inform the team for different things that are actually happening at different points in the kind of onboarding journey, right? To keep everyone informed and most importantly, avoid any delays. That's the number one thing we want to avoid. So how can we actually do this? Well, fairly simple. All we have to do is set up a couple of different automations, if you want to be complicated with it, that whenever a trigger happens, sends a message to your team on Slack or what your sort of communication platform. And this doesn't have to be complicated at all. It doesn't trigger. We can use different things such as the contract being signed. We can use different things such as the onboarding form completed. We can even use payment confirmation, for example. All you want to do here is basically identify different points within the client journey that you want to alert your team of. And once that actually happens, very simply, just alert your team. Now, this doesn't have to be too complicated in terms of the automation side of things, because once again, these are going to be very simple automation, maybe 1 or 2 step automation. Whenever that trigger happens, which you just kind of talked about a second, you go ahead and pop a message in Slack, in a team chat, or wherever else it may be. This is super, super important because, for example, let's say someone has to do something mindedly, they can get alerted straight away. A way to kind of take this to the next level is to begin using a PM system or a work management system. Now, I'm a big fan of building your own in the local. However, let's say you're using something like ClickUp. Very simply now, rather than just sending a message in Slack to that specific person, whenever that specific trigger happens, let's say it's a payment complete, you go ahead and actually create a task within a PM system or project management system to actually complete a specific thing, whether it's, I don't know, sending the onboarding form, right? And this is if you're doing it manually, but it can even be different things such as calling the client and confirming with them their payment, different things like that. This is kind of a way to actually elevate it. Rather than just sending a Slack message, you're actually creating a task for them to complete a certain action. And once again, it kind of avoids you having to set up complicated automations to create different things such as a Google Drive folder. So that's the first way we actually fixed this lack of internal communication. The way we did it is we set up both of them. So first we set up different automations that whenever the specific triggers, we can actually communicate it with the client on Slack. For example, we had a winners room channel that whenever a payment came in, kind of outlined, hey, you got this payment from XYZ. Let's begin onboarding them as soon as possible. And we also set up different automations that at different points in the onboarding process, it would create relevant tasks to their assigned kind of CSM or their relevant person. And then based on this task, they will actually go ahead and kind of fulfill the different things that they want to talk about. So that's the first constraint out of the way. The second constraint, which is probably a lot more important, not probably, 100% is more important, is the external communication. And once again, this is communication between the client. If you remember the onboarding process, between the start all the way to the end, there was only 3 different points where the client was actually being communicated with. There was one when the contract was actually being signed. There was one when they actually completed the onboarding form. And then there was one on the actual call itself. This is not good enough, especially because the onboarding process can be anywhere to 3 to 5 days. We need to bump this up. We need to keep our client in the loop with exactly what's happening. Because remember, guys, as soon as that payment leaves that client account and enters your nice bank account, they're going to feel buyer's remorse. They're going to start regretting the decision. So your job is to basically make sure this does not happen. You want to make them really confident that they've chosen the wrong person and they're going to get the results that they actually signed up for. And an easy way you can do that is just by increasing communication, guys. I mean, I have a rule, right, in the fulfillment process itself, right, even after the onboarding process, that client needs to be communicated with at least once every 2 days. So in the onboarding process, I'm basically on crack. I'm spamming the client with all the different messages, updates, making sure that they know exactly what's happening next and more importantly, what's happening behind the scenes. Because I want to let them know that, okay, you've trusted me with your money. Now I'm going to go ahead and actually deliver exactly what I promised you. So one of the things that was happening within a specific onboarding process is there was a lack of external communication. And what we actually do to fix this is very simple. Similar to what we did for the internal communication is we set up these different triggers within the client onboarding process that whenever something happened, we send them an update message through email or through Slack itself. Because in this case, he had different Slack channels for his actual clients. And this, guys, is honestly as simple as it needs to be. Now, you don't even have to automate this yourself. You can easily just streamline this and do this manually, and either call the client, different things like that to keep them up to date. But this is an easy way to increase your external communication, because remember, guys, in that first 3 to 5 days, they're going to be feeling buyer's remorse. You want to be basically reinforce the decision, and an easy way to keep people kind of reinforced and gain their trust is by communicating with them as much as possible. Even if you feel like you're spamming them, I mean, I have the same thing. I always apologize to my clients because I'm always spamming them with different updates, but trust me, people appreciate it and they enjoy it. So the second way we actually improve this is by basically creating different automations where at different points in a client journey, we updated them. And also, for example, it doesn't have to be just automated, guys. For example, at the very beginning of the process, when a payment actually comes in, we don't just send them an automated message. We actually create a task within the PM system for the actual CEO of the company. And bear in mind, they're not too big just yet, so you can still do this at this point. But we actually create a notification for him to actually call the lead. And this is my attempt at drawing a phone. Not too bad. Call the lead and basically thank them for their payment. So it doesn't have to be, so keep in mind, it doesn't have to be always automated. You can't even do it manually. But yeah, that's the second kind of main constraint. The third constraint we actually talked about was the onboarding form. And there's a couple different things we actually talked about and a couple of different things we improved to the specific onboarding form. Well, I won't go in order, but let's say the first thing we actually do was the affiliates, right? Very simply, this is such an easy fix, and we probably increase his monthly recurring revenue by anywhere from 500 to 5K, and bear in mind, down the line, it's actually going to compile. But for every single link within the actual onboarding form, so link, we just basically changed it with one of his affiliate links. So now every single time someone actually signs up to a specific software on the onboarding form, because remember, he was asking people to sign up to a couple of different softwares, he's going to get that affiliate revenue, and that percentage is going to go straight into his company's bank account, which he can reinvest on team members, even maybe more of my services. So that's the first thing we added. We changed a lot of the links in the actual onboarding form to affiliate links. The second thing we changed in the onboarding form is we added more questions. And these are basically the extra question I was talking about earlier. And I think I don't remember the exact specifics, but we asked different questions such as, anniversaries, birthdays. I think we also did a clothing size because he wants to send him some merch down the line. And I think we also did sports team, I believe. Don't hold me to that, but you get the general idea. Just extra questions that we can use down the line to build a better bond with them. Right, so that's another thing we added to the onboarding form is more personal questions to kind of build a better relationship for them. Another thing, which is probably the most important part of the whole onboarding form that we actually amended, was the different SOPs. Basically, for each of the different steps within the onboarding form, we added a very detailed instructional SOPs, which took the client over exactly how they had to complete this specific part of that onboarding form. For example, let's say they had to sign up to a software. We had a detailed SOP that had a video, had a written description, and a step-by-step guide on exactly what they have to do to complete that specific step. And I'm telling you, this will decrease delays in the onboarding process straight away. Because now when a client has a question about anything within the actual onboarding form, rather than having to wait for no reason, they can just go ahead and check the SOP and deal with it themselves. We still obviously have that support just in case anything happens, but this SOP literally makes it child-proof. I mean, anyone can follow these SOPs and sign up to a specific software, and that was the whole aim of it. So that was the third thing we implemented it. And then the fourth thing, guys, was the reminders. So we are actually quite aggressive with this. As soon as that contract being signed and we actually send the email, we trigger an automation that at 3 different stages check if the onboarding form is not complete. The first one is 6 hours after. So 6 hours after they complete the form, we send them SMS with a reminder they actually need to complete the onboarding form. Then after that, we wait 12 hours again. And if they still haven't completed the onboarding after that, we send them an SMS and an email. Just basically really encourage them to actually complete these onboarding forms. And then we wait for another 24 hours. And if still they haven't completed the onboarding form, and then we create a task for one of their assigned team members to actually give them a call and find out what's going on. Now, the reason we're kind of really heavy on this, because once again, if you go back to the onboarding process, the actual onboarding form is a very important part of the onboarding process because nothing much can happen until they actually complete it. So we're really heavy on making sure that they complete the onboarding form as soon as possible. And we explain this to clients, guys. You're going to come across a bit more spammy, but at the same time, it's going to help your authority. If you think about it like this, right, any delays in the onboarding process is going to delay their chance of getting a specific outcome. If you explain that to the client, they will understand. And even if you send them 10, 15, whatever many messages there is, they're going to know that you're looking out for their best interest. And that's kind of the whole premise of these different reminders. So those are the 4 different changes we made to the onboarding form to actually optimize it. Now let's talk about the fourth constraint that we actually highlighted within the onboarding process, which in this case was the client gifting. And this might not be in order, but it's one of the things we optimize, so let's talk about it. So in the actual onboarding process they had, they weren't sending their clients any sort of gifts, and this is my silly attempt at drawing a gift, but there was none of this. They weren't sending clients any gifts, so we did two different things. Firstly, we introduced handwritten cards. So basically, whenever a client actually first came in, we used a service called, what was it called? It's in a state, it's something along the lines of Handy. And what these guys basically do is they have a bunch of robots which write handwritten cards, and it's really, really cool. They have API access, so you can literally automate this whole process. And basically, as soon as a client comes in, we send over a request to them, and it costs about $3. I mean, it's literally, it's not much at all, especially if you hop on a subscription. And they basically go ahead and send a handwritten card to that specific person with a customized message through anyone in the States. And that's the first thing we did. The second thing we actually did was, as soon as they actually completed the onboarding form, we rewarded them. And in this case, we basically send them a PDF with a ton of different books that are relevant to their specific niche. Once again, the whole premise of what we're doing here is as soon as they complete something, we will reward them and basically show them our appreciation. So here we're just sending them a quick different gift. And the last thing we did was, after the 30 days, we actually went ahead and actually ordered a gift for them. Now, this is interesting because we haven't automated this just yet. And there's a reason for it, because each of the gifts are basically personalized to the specific client. So after the 30 days, we have a kind of rough idea of, who they are, what they like, all that good different things. So we go ahead and actually order something on Amazon for them. I think the budget's about $50. Don't be scared to invest here, guys. You're really investing into your client relationships. And for example, if someone gives you $5K and you spend $50, that's just 1% of the retainer, which in the future might increase this even further by increasing lifetime value. So don't be scared to invest. You can even probably put it 500 if you are really, really good in your services, but I wouldn't go that far just yet. So that's client gifting. We basically set up 3 different sets of gifts: a handwritten card as soon as it's signed up, a kind of quick electronic PDF gift when they completed an onboarding form, and after 30 days of actually being a client, we go ahead and order them a personalized gift with a budget of $50 depending on their specific needs. Now, the last thing, which is probably one of the most important bits if you're watching the channel, and to be honest, all these bits are important, they kind of all work together, but the last thing was specifically the automations. Everything in the onboarding process was manual. From then sending out the email, from them actually creating the Slack channel, creating Google Drive folder. So we basically built a different set of automations that at different points in the onboarding process would actually do different things. So for example, we had one automation that created a Slack channel and the Google Drive folder. We have another automation that was the whole reminder automation. We had another automation that when they actually completed the onboarding form, created different tasks for the relevant team members to actually come in and begin working on the fulfillment, basically. And we also had a couple of different automations to send different updates and reminders both to the team and the actual client. So we'll just call this communication. Now, this is very important, guys, and you don't necessarily need to automate this. As long as you streamline this process of completing different tasks within the onboarding process, you're going to be in a much better position. Once again, you don't want it to be on a basis of I'll do it when I do it, or I do it how I always do it. Because let's say you get sick or you want to import new people, it's going to be a lot more difficult to actually complete all these different tasks if it's not at least streamlined or documented. So I will always recommend first to streamline it and then go in and automate it. But the automation step is optional. Obviously, it is nice to have because it avoids any delays. However, it's not essential. I'd much rather you streamline it and have some sort of documentation on how you can actually do these tasks so you can easily pass it on to someone else. So that was a 5th optimization that we actually introduced to the onboarding process. Very simply, we basically automated different things, right? And this is quite important because it really did tie everything together. We didn't have nearly as many delays in the onboarding process after this. And it was all due thanks to a couple simple automations that whenever something happened, they did something, right? For example, whenever they completed an onboarding form, they go ahead and, create a Slack channel, so on and so forth. The last optimization that we did, and I nearly forgot about this, but this was a welcome sequence. Now, once again, this is kind of cherry on top, but it works really well, especially in this client specific case, because remember, they upfront only collected a 1K deposit and their offer itself was 5K. So in a space of, I think, 60 days, if I remember correctly, they still had to collect an extra 4K from the clients. And the way you have to think about it is throughout the onboarding process and the fulfillment process until the very end of the actual service delivery, they still had to sell the client. Right? It's literally exact same as if you have a lead and you're taking a lead through a sales process, right? Or you're taking a lead for a nurture process. You basically want to sell the client on exactly what it is. So what we did here is very simple. We set up a nurture sequence that's about 7 days, and then another one that was about 30 days, And all these different nurture sequences did is they shared different client success stories. They updated clients on next steps. They shared different resources and tactics. And once again, the very simple thing we did in this kind of process was to give our clients all the evidence that they need to know that they're in the right hands. We're giving them the best service they possibly can get, and they were the right people for the job. And having a welcome sequence or some sort of nurture sequence after the sales process, so during onboarding or even during fulfillment, is an easy way to actually enhance that. So guys, that is pretty much it. That is how we optimize this guy's onboarding process. The video is a bit longer than I expected, to be honest, but I didn't want to hold anything back. And this is exactly why you need to go through different processes like onboarding in your agency, find those key constraints, and then optimize them. Now, it's also important that when you're finding these constraints to have some sort of priority list when you're actually building out these implementations, especially if you're not working with an agency like ourselves, because realistically, as a CEO, as a founder, you don't have as much time as we would do. So I'd much rather you highlight specific points of different items that you want to fix and then fix the top priority items first rather than trying to fix everything at once. So if you're going through a similar process as I did in this video, first find those individual constraints, list them out on a priority level. So for example, the automation might be priority 1 and all the welcome seekers might be priority 5 because it's not that important. And then based on our priority list, attack the most important thing first to get a lot more leverage on your actual time. But guys, that's pretty much it from me. That's how we improve this guy's onboarding process to this behemoth right here. And this, along with a couple of different implementations for his fulfillment and sales process, actually allowed him to 4x his capacity. So this stuff really does work. And honestly, onboarding is a great place to start because once again, it is the first impression your client actually has on you. So you invest a bit of time and money into making it right and really giving them a really good first impression. They will increase that trust that they actually have for you, which in the long run will hopefully decrease that churn rate. Alex Hormozi talks about this all the time. He invests a lot of time and money into getting the onboarding process as perfect as possible because he knows that in the end, in terms of LTV, it's going to go ahead and pay off. That's pretty much it from me, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you want me to come into your agency and break down your sales, onboarding, and fulfillment process, by the time you're watching this, we should have announced our agency audits. This is 100% free. I'll come in with you in about 6 or 7 different Zoom calls and completely break down your agency and create an optimized version for everything that needs to happen, along with a step-by-step roadmap on exactly what you need to do to actually implement those different factors so you can increase the number of clients your agency can actually handle without ruining your client experience. At the end of that process, you also get a report that looks like this. And in it, we basically break down all the individual constraints as to why it's actually happening and create a step-by-step action plan for what you actually need to do to actually fix those constraints. So if you want access to that, by the time you're watching this, we should have released this somewhere in the description. So feel free to join. It's 100% free. If you actually qualify for it, all you have to do is join the waitlist and then you get SMS or a call from someone on my team talking about next steps. Apart from that, guys, that's pretty much it from me. Thank you very much for watching. Let me know what your biggest takeaway was from this video. If you want more kind of roasts like this, breaking down different onboarding processes, sales processes, fulfillment processes, just let me know. I'm very happy to make these. I mean, this is basically what we do now for a lot of the different audits. So I have a lot of content to share similar to this. And if it was valuable, please let me know. Another thing is, if you have any questions about anything I talked about today, leave a comment below. We're a very small channel, so any questions you have, be sure you're going to get in-depth response from me or one of my team members. I'm more than happy to help you guys out any way I can. All right, cool, guys. That's pretty much it from me. Don't stop learning here. Check out this video right here going over how you can actually create a perfect onboarding form in your agency. And apart from that, guys, that's it from me today. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.